All right, today we're cracking open the books on what many are calling the new scramble for Africa. This is a quiet battle. It's not being fought with flags and armies anymore. No, it's being fought with supply chains and lobbyists, and it's all for an almost unimaginable prize. So let's get right into it. So let's start with the number that's at the heart of this whole thing. $29.5 trillion. That is the estimated total value of Africa's mineral wealth. It's a number so huge it almost doesn't feel real, and believe me, it has become a massive magnet for global powers here in the 21st century. Here's how we're going to break it all down in this explainer. First, we'll look at the prize itself. Then, we're going to dissect this very sophisticated new playbook for getting those resources. After that, we'll look at the real human cost with a case study in the Congo, expose the PR war that shapes how we think about this, and finally, we'll explore the new resistance that's fighting for sovereignty. Okay, so let's dive into that mind-boggling figure first. Because what's really fueling this intense global competition, it's not just about what's being mined right now. It's about the massive potential that's still just sitting there, right under the surface.
And this is where it gets really, really interesting. Look at this breakdown. Yeah, the total value is immense, but a huge chunk of it, a full $8.6 trillion worth, is completely untapped. That is the real prize. It's this future potential that has superpowers from the US to China to the Gulf states, all maneuvering for control.
So, how does this all turn into what our sources are calling a new scramble? Well, the game has totally changed. This isn't the colonialism you read about in history books. The tools and the tactics today are way more subtle, way more sophisticated. And this slide just nails the difference, doesn't it? The old scramble was all about brute force, bayonets, drawing lines on maps, and literally planting flags in the ground. But today, it's about controlling the economic architecture. It's about securing mineral supply chains, hiring incredibly powerful lobbyists in DC, and building out the digital infrastructure that the modern world runs on. This leads us to a really important idea: transactional imperialism. You see, the old model of keeping nations dependent on foreign aid is kind of fading out. What's replacing it are these direct competitive deals where things like minerals, ports, and infrastructure are basically traded for military or political support. It's all about locking down what they call strategic asset reserves. Think exclusive rights to a cobalt mine, and controlling the green energy corridors of the future. But here's the thing. This whole external free-for-all, it's only possible because of something happening inside these countries, and it's called elite capture. This is when a country's own powerful figures, we're talking politicians, business leaders, team up with foreign interests to siphon off public resources for their own personal gain. Our sources estimate that over $50 billion are lost every single year to these kinds of illicit flows. That's money that just disappears, basically opening the door for exploitation from the outside. Okay, so let's pull this down from the clouds and make it real. To really get the human cost of this new scramble, we've got to look at the Democratic Republic of Congo. It is the absolute epicenter of the world's hunger for green technology minerals. Just think about this for a second. The DRC produces over 70% of the world's cobalt. That's the critical mineral that's inside the battery of your phone, your laptop, pretty much every electric car on the road. The entire global green transition, in so many ways, it runs straight through the Congo. Now, not long ago, a big peace deal called the Washington Accords was signed between the DRC and its neighbor, Rwanda. And internationally, it was hailed as this historic breakthrough that would finally end decades of conflict. But the real story, as is so often the case, was kind of buried in the fine print. And wow, this quote just cuts right to the bone, doesn't it? Critics argue the deal was less about creating genuine peace and more about securing access to those critical minerals for Western tech companies. The whole agreement was set up to open up the DRC's reserves, and it raises this terrifying question: what happens when peace is just another way of saying a stable supply chain? But the plot thickens, because this fight isn't just happening in Africa. The next front in this battle is being fought thousands of miles away, in the hallways of Washington, D.C., where the narrative, the story itself, is basically for sale. So what do they mean when they say conflicts are being privatized? It's wild. It means that the arguments, the justifications for foreign policy are being cooked up and sold by these super sophisticated PR and lobbying firms. The actual truth of what's happening on the ground, it often gets buried under millions of dollars of carefully crafted messaging. I mean, just look at these numbers from what they call the Nigeria-Biafra lobbying war.
The Nigerian government is paying one firm $750,000 a month to manage its image and influence U.S. policy. Meanwhile, a group advocating for Biafra independence can only scrape together $66,000. It's not even a fair fight. It just shows how money in Washington can decide which stories get heard and which ones get silenced. But this isn't just a story of exploitation, far from it, because all across the continent, a new generation is standing up and refusing to accept this reality. And they're fighting back, not with weapons, but with information. What we're seeing is a new resistance, and it's being led by a super digitally savvy Gen Z. They're using social media to expose corruption literally in real time, connecting movements across borders. And what's so important is that they are completely reframing the conversation. They're shifting it away from a reliance on aid and towards this powerful demand for sovereignty and for justice. And that leaves us with a really tough question, one we all have to think about. As the world rushes to build this green future, are we accidentally powering our clean energy with the same old systems of extraction and exploitation? It's a challenge, really, for all of us to look past the slick marketing of the green transition and start asking who is really paying the price for it.